What if there was a forgotten document, a single piece of paper, with the power to change how we see Jesus Christ? Not just change, but reveal his true face, as described by the very man who condemned him. Imagine a letter, written by Pontius Pilate himself, sketching out Jesus' hair, his eyes, his skin, his whole appearance with startling clarity. Now, this isn't just a wild idea, people claim this letter actually exists. But is it a genuine lost treasure, or just a brilliant fake? For centuries, how we pictured Jesus Christ has mostly come from artists. And often, those artists mirrored their own cultures. We've got the European Jesus in famous Renaissance paintings, a Middle Eastern Jesus in other art, and all sorts of variations. But what if an eyewitness, a high-ranking Roman official, gave us a clear, definitive description? That's where the letter of Pontius Pilate comes in. Sometimes it's called the Acts of Pilate or Anaphropilati.
This book is your beginner's guide to understanding Scripture. Find peace, build relationships, and discover purpose in today's world. Ready to decode the Bible? Find Bible Decoded available on Amazon now.
These are texts claiming to be official reports or even personal letters from Pontius Pilate, who was the Roman governor of Judea, to the emperor back in Rome, usually Tiberius or Claudius. You can see why such a document would be captivating, right? Pilate met Jesus face to face during his trial. He was in a unique spot to observe him. And we know Pilate was real. The Pilate stone, an actual archaeological find from Caesarea Maritima, confirms he was a prefect of Judea. This makes the idea of him writing reports seem at least possible. Early Christian writers, like Justin Martyr around 150 AD and Tertullian near 200 AD, did say that Pilate supposedly sent a report to the emperor about Jesus' trial and execution. Even Eusebius of Caesarea, a big-name historian in the early 4th century, mentioned a report like this. But here's the catch: these early writers never actually quoted what the letter said, especially not any physical description of Jesus. The really detailed descriptions that have got everyone talking? Those pop up in much later versions of these texts. So, what does this controversial letter, particularly the later versions that caused such a fuss, actually say about how Jesus looked? Get ready, because the details are pretty vivid. Section 2, The True Face Unveiled? A vivid description. The descriptions of Jesus in some versions of Pilate's supposed letter are striking, especially the ones that got popular between the 15th and 19th centuries and are still all over the internet. They paint a picture far more detailed than anything you'll find in the Gospels, which are actually pretty quiet about Jesus' physical features. According to these texts, Jesus was a man of stature somewhat tall and comely, with a very reverend countenance, such as the beholders may both love and fear. Right away, that gives you an idea of someone with a strong, yet approachable presence. His hair gets a lot of attention, the color of a chestnut, full ripe, plain to his ears, whence downward it is more orient and curling, and wavering about his shoulders. The letter often adds there was a seam or partition of his hair after the manner of the Nazarites. This image of long, flowing, chestnut-colored hair is very specific, and it's definitely influenced how many artists have pictured him over the years, even if they didn't directly credit this letter. The description moves on to his face. His forehead was smooth and very plain, and his face without spot or wrinkle, beautified with a lovely red. His nose and mouth were so formed as nothing can be reprehended, hinting at a sort of classic perfection.
Feeling anxious or disconnected? Ready for a deeper faith journey designed just for you? Discover Bible Study for Black Women. This guide nurtures faith, strength, and growth week by week. Overcome fear and connect with God. This empowering journey is waiting. Find Bible Study for Black Women on Amazon today and start building unshakable faith.
Then there's the beard, thick, in color like his hair, not very long, but forked. And his eyes? They're described as gray, clear, and quick. Some versions even say his hands and arms were very delectable to behold. Beyond just the looks, the letter also mentions his character. saying he was grave, temperate, and modest, a person who inspired both love and awe. It's a complete, almost movie-like image. If it were real, it would totally change our understanding of Jesus' appearance, giving us a solid image instead of centuries of different interpretations. The detail is compelling, so specific it's almost convincing. But the big question is still there: where did this incredibly detailed description actually come from? The idea of a first-hand Roman account detailing Jesus' face is incredibly appealing. But, when historians and scholars take a close look at these letters, especially the ones with those vivid physical descriptions, some serious problems show up. The first big issue? We don't have any original Roman records or verified personal writings from Pilate himself. While those early Christian writers mentioned reports, they didn't give us the text, and, importantly, they didn't include any physical descriptions. The juicy details that get people excited appear in texts where the oldest copies we have are from much later, usually the 4th to 6th centuries. Some versions with the physical descriptions are even more recent than that. Today, scholars pretty much all agree the letter of Pontius Pilate and the Acts of Pilate that describe Jesus' appearance aren't genuine Roman documents. They're seen as Christian literary creations, often called apocrypha writings, that aren't part of the accepted scriptural canon. These texts were probably written for a few reasons. Maybe to back up Christian stories in a world where Roman documents carried a lot of weight, or simply to satisfy that natural human curiosity about Jesus' life, an appearance that the Gospels don't really get into. They tell us more about the theological ideas and devotional practices of the times they were written in, rather than being straight-up, first-century Roman accounts. Think about it like a Roman governor. Would he, when reporting to the emperor about an execution in some province, really include flowery, detailed descriptions of the condemned man's hair, eye color, and skin? Roman official letters were usually pretty practical and to the point. The fancy language and focus on looks are much more typical of later biographies and legends, especially those trying to paint a respectable and attractive picture of a revered figure. And what's more, the actual physical details given, the chestnut hair, forked beard, gray eyes, look a lot like the European artistic styles for depicting Jesus. That developed over centuries, especially in the medieval and Renaissance periods. This makes it seem like the descriptions in these later texts might have been shaped by art that already existed, or grew up alongside it, instead of being the ancient source for that art. It's more likely the art influenced the letter, not the other way around for the earliest depictions. There are no early, independent sources that back up this specific description. The New Testament Gospels, our main sources for Jesus' life, don't give us a physical sketch. Paul's letters don't mention it. Early church fathers, when they did guess about Jesus' appearance, sometimes looked to Old Testament prophecies, like Isaiah's suffering servant. This suggested he might have been unremarkable, or even physically imperfect, a world away from the handsome figure in the Pilate letter. So, while the idea of Pilate sending a report isn't totally out of left field, especially since early Christian apologists mentioned it, the actual content of the letters we have today, especially those with the detailed physical descriptions, is widely considered by historians not to be authentic first-century Roman stuff. This whole investigation pulls back the curtain on a fascinating story of how texts can change over time, and how our desire to connect with historical figures can lead to some compelling, even if not entirely factual, stories. What do you think? Why would people write these later descriptions? Drop your theories in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this dive into historical mysteries, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what we explore next. So, if this detailed description of Jesus isn't from a genuine letter by Pontius Pilate, why does it even exist? Why would someone, centuries down the line, write something like this and say it was from a Roman governor? The answers get into human nature, faith, and the sheer power of a good story. First off, we humans just naturally want to visualize things. For followers of someone as huge as Jesus Christ, the fact That the main texts like the Gospels don't describe him physically could be a bit frustrating. People want a clear image, something to focus on when they're praying or creating art. If you could create a document that gave them that, and say it came from a believable eyewitness like Pilate, it would carry a lot of authority and satisfy the deep need. Secondly, in the early centuries of Christianity, and even later on, there was a big need to defend the faith. Christians were often a minority group, sometimes facing persecution. They wanted to prove their beliefs and historical claims to the wider, often doubtful, Roman and Greek world. A Roman document that seemed to confirm details about Jesus could have been a powerful piece of propaganda or defense. While the first mentions of Pilate's report by people like Justin Martyr and Tertullian might have been to argue that Jesus wasn't just made up, later additions, like physical descriptions, could have helped make Jesus seem more relatable and admirable in a culture that really valued physical beauty and a noble look. Thirdly, these texts often had a devotional angle. A vivid description could help believers meditate on Jesus' humanity, to feel closer to him. It could inspire artists, shaping how Jesus was shown in icons, paintings, and sculptures for ages. And even if the letter's description was itself influenced by existing European art, it probably also fed back into that art scene, creating a kind of loop where certain features just became the standard. Creating documents like this also shows how much reverence people had for Jesus. The desire to show him in the best possible light, handsome, dignified, with perfect features, is pretty understandable. It's a way of honoring him, highlighting how special he was. The description in the letter is super positive, designed to make you feel love and awe. Also, the time when many of these apocryphal texts became popular was a period when the lines between history, legend, and religious storytelling were a lot more blurred than we might be comfortable with today. The goal often wasn't strict historical accuracy as we think of it, but more about sharing deeper truths or filling in what they saw as gaps in the main story. So, even if it's not historically real, the Pilate's letter describing Jesus' appearance is a powerful testament to the incredible impact Jesus had and our unending fascination with him. It tells us more about the people who wrote and read these texts, their faith, what they longed for, their cultural backdrop, than it does about the actual eye color of Jesus of Nazareth. It highlights something a commentator once said, that while we can't be sure they're authentic, such documents can give us a glimpse into how people in the ancient world viewed Jesus Christ, his appearance, and his profound impact on history. Though, it's fair to say these very detailed descriptions reflect how later people viewed him. So, where does that leave us? It's a fascinating spot. On one side, there's this tantalizing document, supposedly from Pontius Pilate, giving an almost photographic description of Jesus Christ. On the other, pretty much all historical and textual scholars agree that these specific descriptive letters are later Christian inventions, not actual Roman reports. Does that mean the letter is worthless? Not really. While it might not be a factual account of Jesus' appearance written by Pilate, it's a fascinating historical artifact in its own way. It shows the centuries-long human hunger to know more about Jesus, to fill in the blanks the official scriptures left. It shows how faith, storytelling, and art all mix together, each one influencing the others in an ongoing creative dance. These texts really show how much people wanted to connect with the person of Jesus on a more real, tangible level. The vivid descriptions, whether they're historically on point or not, have definitely shaped how people imagine Jesus, and how artists have depicted him for centuries. That image of a tall Jesus with flowing chestnut hair and a forked beard is really baked into Western culture. And texts like these, even if they're apocryphal, help lock that image in place. Our ongoing fascination with Pilate's supposed letter also shows how much we still search for real, physical links to the past, especially when it comes to figures of huge historical and spiritual importance. The idea of a shocking revelation or a hidden truth is always pretty exciting. But it's so important to look at claims like these with a critical eye, balancing the pull of the sensational with solid historical investigation. Maybe the search for Jesus' true face isn't so much about finding an ancient photo or a perfectly preserved description. Maybe it's more about understanding all the different ways he's been seen, interpreted, and honored throughout history. The fact that the Gospels are silent on how he looked might even be significant itself. Perhaps to steer our focus away from outward appearances and more towards his message and actions. The story of Pilate's letter, with its detailed yet disputed description of Jesus, is more than just a historical side note. It's like a window into the human heart, our capacity for faith, our creativity, and our unending desire to connect with the divine and the major figures who shape our world. The journey of Pilate's letter, from a rumored report to this detailed picture of Jesus' face and skin color, is quite a story. While the evidence really stacks up against the vivid physical descriptions, being from Pilate's own hand, they seem to be later additions. The story itself tells us a lot. It speaks volumes about Jesus' lasting impact and that very human desire to give a face to the figures we have faith in. These narratives, real or not, weave themselves into the fabric of our culture, influencing art, how we worship, and our very imaginations. They remind us that history is often a mix of things we can verify, legends that last, and the stories we tell to make sense of the past, and the incredible people who shaped it. What does our lasting fascination with Jesus' physical appearance tell us about ourselves and our need to connect? Why do these kinds of descriptions still grab our attention and stir up debate, even centuries later? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this investigation. Until next time, keep questioning and keep exploring.